Welcome back. In this video, I would like to share the XDM server environmental requirements such as RAM, disk space, and CPU. Combined with existing product requirements, the customer must carefully understand the minimum XDM server requirements and then project the capacity system requirements for a successful enterprise deployment. You can deploy the XDM server on Windows or Linux, and those must be 64-bit OS. Ideally, you should select a server class system to host the XDM server with 4 cores at minimum. Besides the installation disk space and the projected design data, you should have roughly 3.5 GB available for the active XDM server to be deployed within your host machine. Network capacity of 1 gigabits per second is our recommendation, while slower networks, such as 100 megabits per second, can still be successful depending on the overall network traffic. Exclusive to the operating system RAM requirements and any other software running on the host machine, you should allocate sufficient RAM for the XDM server operations. As a rule of thumb, we suggest 32 GB of RAM to support 100 concurrent client applications accessing the XDM server. We will discuss Oracle settings suggested for optimized performance. Last but not least are the required ports. You must enable the XDM server to use several ports which can either be automatically assigned or explicitly and manually defined. In either case, these ports must be open and available for the XDM server to use. To achieve optimal performance, it is recommended to choose the XDM server configuration based on the estimated maximum concurrent client application load. A client application, such as XDM Design Client or XDM Library Client, or even a browser that connects to the XDM server with XDM Collaborator, is considered to be an instance of a client application. In this case, several client applications can be initiated from a single client host machine. For example, a user on a given client machine that connects to the XDM server with an instance of the XDM Design Client, XDM Library Client, and then opens a browser with XDM Collaborator would be considered as 3 concurrent client applications. Once you have estimated the number of concurrent client applications accessing the XDM server, you should use the XDM server load in the configuration manager to set it up. Our performance optimization is based on extensive XDM server simulation tests that were used to establish the recommended settings for the server load. The values in this table will instruct the deployment utilities to optimize your XDM server to support such concurrent client applications load on the server. It is important that you try to foresee the growth of these factors for the next year or 2. Obviously, host systems exceeding the preceding hardware specification can result in even better performance. The XDM server provides XDM Collaborator services to clients that enables viewing of designs and collaboratively review them. To do that, it manages a database cache in order to improve the response time to clients. The size of the database cache is an important factor that influences the performance of the XDM server and requires configuration of the XDM server during the server deployment process. The configuration for you to influence the XDM Collaborator memory and therefore the performance of the XDM server is by setting the largest design size in the Configuration Manager under XDM Design Services tab. There are 2 types of largest design size, PCB and net. You should provide type as PCB if setting based on design file size of layout dB in megabytes, or net if based on the number of electrical nets. Note that if you're using both schematics and PCB design tools, you should provide PCB settings. The net settings should be used only when there is no possibility of providing a PCB reasonable layout DB size. In addition to the base level RAM requirements, other factors contribute to the amount of RAM necessary to support an optimal running XDM server. If the XDM library services are deployed onto the XDM server, there will be a minimum of 50 MB per each concurrent XDM library session connected to the XDM server. Since customers can extend the library data model with new classes, catalog groups, properties, for example up to 250 MB, you have to take that into account when configuring your external resources used by the XDM server. Here is an example. Out of 50 concurrent client applications, which requires 16 GB according to the table that we just saw, on average, 20 are concurrent library sessions. In the default use case of 50 MB per session, we will end up with 17 GB required. However, for a customer that has a 250 MB of library data model, it will sum up to 21 GB. Prior to deploying the XDM server, which is targeted to use an Oracle server for the database, instead of using the default embedded database, the customer must configure the targeted Oracle server, including a number of settings essential for optimal performance. The following table reflects the results of Mentor Graphics' internal testing based on the number of concurrent client applications access the XDM server. These settings should be adjusted within your environment if further optimization is needed based on observations. In this video, we described the environmental requirements for the XDM server. Those included the supported OS, the hardware, ports, and the Oracle optimization. We discussed the factor that influences the RAM capacity, such as the number of client applications accessing the server, the largest design size, and the number of XDM library sessions. Finally, we reviewed the Oracle database settings. Please remember that much more detailed information is found on the user's guide.